Hey, I'm Chelsea,
And I'm Tony Northrup.
and you're watching our Canon 7D Mark II rapid review. I'm not sure how rapid it's going to be.
We'll try to be fast about it.
We have a loose definition of rapid, but we're trying to be fast.
So the new Canon 7D Mark II is in our hands, and we have been doing nothing but testing it straight out. I took it to my daughter's indoor soccer game to do some indoor sports testing. We took it out wildlife, shooting this morning, chasing some birds.
We did some portraits.
Yep, portraits.
Outdoor, indoor portraits.
We did kind of objective focus testing, walking to and from the camera indoors and outdoors in low light and bright light to see how it compared against the original 7D, the 5D Mark III, and a couple of other cameras too.
I did a durability test.
What did you do for the durability test?
I drop kicked it. No, I didn't.
Yeah, people would freak out if you did that. So let's get right into the results. You can ask questions at any time. Just write a comment, and our screener Siobhan over in Philly will send the questions over to us, and we'll answer them at the end of the show. And if you're watching this recorded, you can still add a comment, and we'll probably see it and answer for you.
We'll probably see it.
Image quality. We had a couple of specific questions from people who follow us on Twitter and Facebook, which is a good thing to do. Eric asks, how does it perform at ISO 1200 and up, especially compared to the 5D Mark III? I'll show you that in just a sec. And Chris asks, he wants to hear about the noise and image quality compared to the 7D Mark I. Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, we gotcha.
This is a sample shot. I have images from every single ISO from a variety of different cameras. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll get the download link in a little bit. I have to compile it still. But this is ISO 1600 on the 7D Mark II on the left and the original on the right. So how do those look to you, Chelsea? You haven't seen these yet.
No, I haven't. The one on the right looks noisier.
Yeah, it looks way worse, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is the Mark II on the left, and it just looks far better to my eye. What do you think over there, Justin? How do those look? This is your first time seeing them.
Like a third set of eyes, Justin.
I think it's noticeably noisier on the right.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, that's the old camera.
Especially you can see up here, it's just so grainy.
Yes, and this is kind of a big deal because
This is a big deal.
there was a time when we just took these image quality improvements for granted, but Canon has not made a noticeable image quality improvement since they released the Mark II, like 6 years ago. So Canon made a better sensor. This is like fantastic. The whole world's been waiting for Canon to move forward because Nikon and Sony and Fuji and Olympus, every other company out there has been steadily getting better, and Canon has been doing nothing. So congrats, Canon.
They've been working on it quietly.
I guess so, because this is a leap.
This is a big improvement.
Yeah, this is a big improvement. This is the same photos pushed 2 stops to see how much of the shadows we can bring out.
You really
because
see a
recovering
big
shadows
here.
is really important, especially, well, for every type of photography. You always need to be able to recover some details and shadows, and this really highlights how much less noise there is in the new 7D Mark II. Look how much better it looks.
This
That's
looks
a world
like
better, right?
funfetti cake.
Yes, and well, this is one of the reasons you never liked the original 7D, because
I know you called me a snob then, but I was just ahead of my time. I was like, I can't have any of this.
yes, Chelsea's job was to remove all noise from images before submitting them to our commercial clients. And so this kind of thing, you can imagine, would be really frustrating to her. So I'm amazed. Pulled 2 stops at ISO 1600. The Mark II looks fantastic. This is against the Sony a6000, which has basically the best APS-C sensor in the world right now. This is a Sony sensor.
Well, this is getting really interesting, Tony.
Yes, which of these do you think looks better?
The one on the left still.
The 7D Mark II looks better than the Sony a6000 to me by a long shot.
Oh, get ready for hate mail.
Canon made a sensor better than Sony. Significantly better. Now, I should note these aren't processed exactly the same. Unfortunately, that's impossible right now. This is processed in Lightroom, and this is processed in Canon's raw processing software. We'll have to wait for Adobe to release the software. I need to process it using Adobe Camera Raw. To be completely fair, but to me, the Canon looks way better. Let's pull it up 2 stops to exaggerate that noise in the shadows.
Yeah, it's still the same.
Yeah, Canon just looks far better. Look at the gradations on the ring here.
You should comment. Tell us what you think, what you're seeing.
Yeah, tell me if you disagree with the results. We're open to other opinions. To me, it just seems so obvious. I am stunned that Canon made a better sensor than Sony. They were really just building to something, I guess.
Yeah.
This is versus the 5D Mark III,
What?
a full frame camera. What do you think here?
I still think that the 7D Mark II looks a little cleaner. The words are covering up some of the parts with the noise that I'm looking at.
Yeah, I'll make the full files available for download. Just follow Chelsea and I on Twitter, and you'll be able to get them, or on Facebook, and I'll post them in both places.
But I think it looks slightly better.
Yeah, to my eye, it was close enough not to matter. But that's remarkable, right? The 7D has the same or similar image quality to the 5D Mark III,
Yeah.
a full frame camera. Now, the 5D Mark III is not a good full frame camera, not for image quality. It is for other things, but the image quality is generally bad. But still, that's fairly remarkable. This is, again, pulled two stops. Now, here on the Mark III, we see some random colors that don't actually exist that kind of got introduced. The color on the 7D seems to have just stayed better throughout the process of bringing up the exposure. So to me, these are both processed with the Canon software, so it actually is a fair fight.
I had so much fun using it too.
Yeah, you like that 7D Mark II.
I'm like the office skeptic, because every time we get a new camera, I'm like, who needs that? Or, I'm just not like technology oriented. If it's not going to improve my life, I'm not about to get excited over some arbitrary new stat that's supposed to make me freak out. Like, I want to use it in the field. I want to see the difference. And rarely am I excited, and I was really, really excited about this camera.
Justin, what do you think on this particular frame, 7D Mark II versus the 5D Mark III?
I think I'm also looking like at a slightly smaller version, but it is pretty obvious to me. I definitely think the 7D Mark II wins. I have a question though.
Yeah.
You keep saying you think it's because of an improved sensor. Why not maybe like an improved firmware or something like that?
Good question. Why not a software update? Because I'm working with the raw files, and the in-camera software won't make any changes to that. So I'm not comparing JPEGs here. I do not care about JPEGs. And if you care about image quality, you're going to be working with the raw files anyway. So we have seen improvements to JPEG quality from Canon, but I don't care about that. I want to see the raw files. That's all that matters to me. And they made an improvement to the raw files. And in my eye, they've leapfrogged Canon, or they leapfrogged their own selves, Canon, but also Nikon and Sony. And Sony was better than everybody else. So they seem to be the head of the pack. This seems to be the best image quality from any APS-C camera I've ever seen.
We do have a longer review coming out too, because we're going to spend more time with the camera and we'll do more in-depth tests.
Yeah.
So you'll have to stick around for that, because we might be changing our minds.
Yeah, we like to live with the camera for a couple of weeks, but we know a lot of people are eager to kind of make a decision, and we knew we could get through a lot of the tests first. So this is our first test, but do subscribe to the channel and you'll be able to see the forthcoming longer review. NSNQST asks, would you care to read this?
Tony and Clelsey. Hey, have both your books. That's good. We'd love to know how the 7D2 compares against the 7DD, especially noise under low light. I know they are positioned differently, but can't elaborate here. Robbie.
So as far as image quality goes, the 70D we found to be identical to the 7D, even though they have different sensors. The 70D is 20 megapixels versus 18 megapixels on the original 7D. But they were about the same. So the 7D Mark II substantially better than the 7DD as well. I do have raw files from the 70D to compare, but stay tuned for those. Well, you just mentioned this. If you want to check out our original 7D Mark II preview, where we go over the stats of the different cameras and talk about how it compares to the Nikon versions and such, go to sdp.io/7D2 preview.
Yeah.
Wildlife. We took it out this morning.
Oh, we did.
How did you feel about it?
I was so excited about the 10 frames per second. I couldn't even believe it. And I had a hard time adjusting to it initially, because I'm used to lifting my finger in anticipation of the buffering, and it just wasn't happening. It was unbelievable, and a lot of them were in focus too. I will say one mistake I made is I had the 400 millimeter with a 1.4 times teleconverter, and so the images weren't as sharp as they could have been, but it was still seemed great.
Yeah, we do have a specific question about the 7D Mark II with the 400-5.6 that we recommend all the time.
Yeah.
The 7D with the 400-5.6 has been our #1 budget wildlife recommendation.
Yeah,
So we
I do
tried it
like
out with
that.
the 7D Mark II. And one feature that the 7D Mark II has is FA autofocus. So we haven't really been able to use the teleconverter with the 400-5.6 on the 7D in the past. We put it on there now because we could autofocus finally, only with the center autofocus point. And yeah, we were disappointed with that.
Yeah.
It's
I have sample pictures. Oops, I have sample pictures.
you have some coming up.
They're
Great.
coming up. Yeah, so this is
Ah.
the 400 millimeter with the 1.4 time teleconverter, and that's it, really zoomed in so that you can see detail. So I looked all over the picture. I didn't miss focus. It's technically in focus. It's just not very clear. I really pushed the limits of the camera with that setup.
Yeah, maybe somebody could do the math, but it would be 400 times 1.4 times 1.6.
Yeah.
But it ends up being like 1,000 millimeters. And yeah, it's too much for that little lens. But we did use the 500 f4.
I have sample pictures of that too. So
Oh,
the
you're all
next
prepared.
one, this is another picture just to give another example. Also the 400 millimeter.
That's a really cute picture. I love when you can see the little footsteps in
They're
the
really
water.
cute. Doop, doop, doop. And then I zoomed in so you could see details again.
Yeah.
So you can see it's pretty good. I think a lot of people would be okay with that.
Yeah, especially because we tend to view it kind of small. I've definitely seen worse wildlife pictures shared.
But for me, if I can't put it in my portfolio,
Yeah.
I don't want to go out. The next one is the 500 millimeter, I believe. Yeah, this is the 500 millimeter. So this isn't cropped at all. And then the next picture is cropped so you can see. And I did actually increase the saturation a bit.
Yeah, it was kind of a hazy day.
Yeah,
But to me, that looks very sharp.
it looks pretty good.
Yeah. That's with our big 500 f4. So you can put a teleconverter on that and still have a ton of sharpness, which is still pretty remarkable because you have a 1.6 crop and 20 megapixels. Now, it's something we don't have a slide for. With wildlife, you often have to crop anyway. You're almost always cropping at least 1.6x because birds don't
Unless
like to get
you're
close.
really lucky.
Yeah, or you plan like you're wearing a ghillie suit or you're hiding in a blind or
Well,
you have food or something.
It was hard today because we just had to go out. And
Yeah,
the
we had a
wildlife was
deadline.
not having it. We just had ducks and things. But I can't wait. When we spend more time with this camera, I want to take it out and take the teleconverter off and try to get close to animals. See what we can do.
So if you have to crop anyway, it's interesting to note that at a 1.6 crop, the 5D Mark III is about 8.5 megapixels. So the 7D Mark II at 20 megapixels has just more than twice as much detail as the much more expensive 5D Mark III is in scenarios where you can't get close enough, where you have to crop. And that's all the time with wildlife. And there are no APS-C lenses for wildlife. You pretty much end up using full-frame primes. Do you have other sample pictures for me? Oh, a point we wanted to talk about was the autofocus points.
Yeah, the autofocus points were incredible.
Yeah, they're really spread around the frame, and it really makes a difference.
But this is the 70.
Right, that's the original.
So it's got 19 points. This is the 7D Mark II, has 65 points, all cross-type focusing points.
Yeah, so the rule of thirds has you composing a lot of your subjects along these rule of thirds lines, and you can see the 7D has no focus points
Yeah.
where you would want to compose. You'd want them down here. But suddenly the Mark II, you have points going even past the rule of thirds. And with portrait work or still life, you can focus, recompose, no
Yeah.
problem. But with wildlife, sports, or weddings, any sort of action, you really need a focus point there that can track the moving subject because you don't have time to focus,
Right.
recompose. It's also sharper and more accurate. So having these focus points out to the edge makes a real tangible difference in photography, improves your composition, and lets you get more beautiful pictures.
Yeah, and that's something that I think makes this camera a good all-around camera because it's being marketed as like a sports and wildlife camera, which is good at, but it's also a great all-around camera. I took portraits with it and it
Yes.
works really well.
So for portraits and weddings and such, you're really going to appreciate this, especially because you're not giving up any image quality over the 5D Mark III, it seems like. We'll back up a little bit because I know I skipped an important question here. Oh, okay. If you could test the FA autofocus with a 1.4x teleconverter, yeah, we were just talking
That's
about
why I
that.
put those pictures there. Pretty smart.
Well,
Yeah.
to answer his question, the autofocus works well, in my experience, with the 400 and the 1.4x
Right.
teleconverter, but you don't get any more detail, really. The image quality is not great. So I just wouldn't bother with the teleconverter.
Well, the reason why I showed those pictures uncropped too is to show just how far away we are. Because if we're at like 1,000 millimeters and they still look that far away, the first picture, it's like you're not going to get image quality, especially on a hazy morning like we had.
Yeah, wildlife photography isn't something that you can get over in a couple of hours. Studio photography, yes. Portraits, yes. But wildlife, you have to wait for nice light. And
patient.
November and Connecticut isn't the ideal time for wildlife photography. I did want to suggest a couple of settings for wildlife photography. I and the 5D Mark III have experimented with all the different AF cases, and I still end up going back to the default of AF case 1. Like the 5D Mark III, the 7D Mark II allows you to kind of customize the AF behavior for erratically moving subjects or subjects that accelerate and decelerate or change direction. The defaults seem to work the best for wildlife for me. I also want to say, by default, it has this cool little controller on the back, just like the 5D Mark III, that lets you change your focusing points, but it's not turned on by default. You have to like hit the focus point button and then do it. So turn that on so you don't have to hit that other button, because you're always moving your focus point around to get the composition you want.
Right. When I was taking the portraits of you and Justin, it was great because I could just recompose so easily.
Yeah, I don't know why they don't turn that on by default. They just should.
It was nice. I liked that feature.
It also has a little dial, which is terribly useful, and you can turn that on by default, so you can switch between a single focus point or group focusing modes.
Yeah.
That's really helpful because for flying birds against a blue sky, I like to use all the focus points. It just means you don't have to be quite as precise with your focusing point. But if they're flying in front of trees or something that the focusing system might lock on, then I go to a single focus point. So I'm constantly switching between group AF and individual points, and I love that they now have a dedicated dial for that. It really makes it very usable.
That's a good feature.
I also wanted to suggest using JPEG instead of RAW because it's a very fast camera, and I think it has a buffer of 33 frames, raw frames. At 10 frames a second, though, that means you run out of buffer in like 3.5 seconds. And a bird coming towards you, you can be shooting it for 5, 6, 10 seconds sometimes, and it gets frustrating when you run out of buffer. So you won't buffer as quickly with the JPEG, but you then won't get the same quality. You won't be able to recover your shadows or recover your highlights if you have like a white bird on a dark background, or birds that have black wings and a white belly.
I'll have to try it. I don't know if you would convince me to go to JPEG for that.
I know I won't convince you.
Because I think I'd rather just work on my timing.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we're already kind of in the habit of letting off the shutter and letting the buffer catch up a little bit, shooting in bursts, waiting till you see the whites of their eyes.
I'd rather have those raw files, but I'll try it.
These are some relevant stats. The Sharp FPS number here, well, first I'll go over, this is the raw buffer for a variety of different cameras. And you can see the 7D Mark II has about the same buffer as the 5D Mark III does, a little bit smaller. But with that much higher frames per second, you can see you run out of buffer in 3 seconds instead of 5 seconds. So it's something you have to be aware of. You have to keep letting up or you will just fill up that buffer. 10 frames a second, we should just turn this on and let them hear what it sounds like. No.
That's not it.
That was a slow shutter speed, but let me get the shutter speed over.
It made me feel like Rambo. You can also, there's a quiet mode, but you only get like 4 frames per second. But it won't be as noisy as that.
Yeah, but I've actually found the shutter to be much quieter than that in the 7D, which is nice because your shutter will disturb birds. If you happen to get close enough that you could fill the frame, it will wake them up and make them leave immediately, meaning you get exactly 1 shot.
Well, it's still pretty loud. That's what I'm saying. If that's really a priority, you have that option.
Yeah. It is helpful, and I will do that at times. I guess we'll go over the Sharp frames per second in a minute, but I'll go over it now. We did a bunch of testing with for our sports tests, and these are the results that I came up with. The 70D and the 7D have the same focusing system, and they both end up with about 2.7 Sharp frames per second, starting out with 7 frames a second. So they have good focusing systems, but in our strenuous tests, they were getting like a little bit over a third in focus. The 5D Mark III has an excellent focusing system, but because of the slower frame rate, it was getting only 4.5 Sharp frames a second. The 7D Mark III seems to have a very similar a similarly capable focusing system as the 5D Mark III. We got about the same results, and it ended up producing almost 7 sharp frames a second.
Wow.
So quite a few more sharp frames a second. And in fact, that's a better result than we got from the Nikon D810 or any other camera. You might get better results with like a 1DX or a D4S, but we haven't tested those, the high-end like $6,000-$7,000 cameras.
Yeah.
But everything we've tested, it gets more sharp frames a second. Best action camera ever. I'd say the best wildlife camera ever, wouldn't you?
That I've tried.
Yeah, and well, we've
tried a
tried
lot.
basically everything, yeah.
Yeah.
The combination of this small sensor and the high pixel density bringing you closer to animals and bringing in all the detail and the amazing focusing system. It's expensive, but I just wanted to mention it has GPS. That's cool.
GPS is cool, guys. This is the future.
For wildlife photographers, it helps you get back to your original location. If you want to retrace your steps for landscape photographers, you can find your way back to the scene. But mostly just for those of us who take a vacation, it's really cool because when you pull it into Lightroom, all your pictures will show up on a map. And then you can say, I want to see our pictures from Disneyland. Instead of trying to dig through and find keywords or remember the dates that you were there, you just pull it up on a map and scroll over.
I love that.
And you can find your pictures. GPS is a fantastic feature, burns through batteries.
Oh,
but
I hadn't thought
it
of
is
that.
really, really useful. Let's talk about sports. Now, we both used it some
sports. What
last
about
night.
that team?
That team,
How about
yeah.
that team last night, guys?
What did you think of it shooting Mad's indoor soccer game?
Oh,
Our daughter,
one thing that
Madeline.
I really loved about it is that I always struggle to get that moment when they just hit the ball or kick the ball or whatever ball they're using, whatever you do with it. But with so many frames per second, you can kind of just anticipate when it was going to happen
Yeah.
and just lock in and just keep that shutter button down.
Mhm.
And it was getting the shots. I mean, last night it was actually difficult because everything's through glass. It's almost like a hockey rink.
Yeah.
So they were coming out about a bit hazy, but I really liked it. We'll have to try it outdoors with sports.
Yeah, the conditions weren't great, but in low light, it was low enough light that we were shooting at ISO 6400, and that the focusing system worked fantastically.
Yeah.
We do have some more results here. We,
Ooh.
again, used Chelsea to do indoor and outdoor focusing tests, and these were what I calculated as the in-focus shots. The original 7D, as I said, got only about a little better than a third of the shots in focus. It was a strenuous test, walking directly towards the camera with a telephoto lens, so we wanted to really stress the cameras. In those conditions, the 7D Mark II got about twice as many in focus. And it also had 50% more frames because of the higher frame rate. So it just got way higher frames, total frames sharp. And the 5D Mark III still did better in low light, but did about the same in the bright outdoor light. Yeah, so in other words, it's a very reliable camera. The focusing system seems top-notch. Top-notch.
Top-notch. Portraits.
This was your field. I know you have some sample pictures in here.
Oh,
but
I really just took a few snapshots of Tony and Justin because a lot of you were asking if it was a good all-around camera, and I think it is. I love all of the focusing points. Like you said, it allows you to have focusing points right in the rule of thirds.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it's nice and sharp. It's got good color, and it worked well. It was a great camera.
Yeah, and you just took these shots with what's the typical kit lens,
Yeah.
which is the 18-135, and it's a lens I like. It's not the sharpest lens.
No, it's not like some fancy expensive lens came with the camera.
Yeah.
I'd normally use the 70-200, so I wasn't actually expecting much. They came out way better than I thought they would.
Yeah, you can get some decent background blur at the long end of that. Not bad. There's our man, Justin.
That's Justin, our handsome dude, and a few more of Justin.
You can't get enough Justin.
So I thought, I mean, just for snapshots, those look really nice. I could see people using that as a professional setup.
Yeah, I think the one drawback for things like portraits and weddings is that it's not a full frame camera. So you're not taking, if only we had great APS-C portrait lenses.
Yeah.
We just don't. You have the 70-200 full frame lens, and when you put an APS-C camera on there, it becomes like an f4.5 lens. So you don't get the same background blur. I can't wait for a 5D Mark IV sometime, or some full frame Canon camera that actually benefits from this improved image quality that they seem to have invented.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have results to show you right now, but we did try the video focusing on it. The video focusing seems to perform about the same as the Canon 70D did. We also compared it to the GH4, and they're pretty similar. They behave differently. They don't track subjects perfectly. They're a little erratic, especially with sports. I found that the 7D Mark II will track a subject and then lock onto a background and then come back. So you see the focus kind of pulling in and out. It's still a world better than the original 7D or the 5D Mark III or any camera other than the Canon 70D or the Sony SLT cameras. Now, mirrorless cameras like our GH4 or the A6000 tend to do better than most DSLRs and are kind of on par with the 7D Mark II or the 70D. So, is it good at video focusing? Yes, but it doesn't have a touch screen. So you have a really difficult time controlling where it's going to focus. All I could really do was to put it in the mode where it decides the focus point for you. With the 70D, you can just touch the touchscreen and it will focus right there and it will even track a subject pretty well. And it's pretty remarkable. But with the 7D Mark II, you use a little joystick, and when you use the joystick, you shake the whole camera around. It's not a great video camera. I would not recommend it for people looking for video. If you must have a DSLR, I would pick the 70D instead, or I'd push you towards the GH4 more likely. At the same price point, the GH4 is a far better video camera. Questions?
Are you asking me if I have questions, or are you asking me to read the questions?
I was asking you to read it so I could have some of my beer.
Love Svensson. That is an excellent name. Is it true that the 7D Mark II does not autofocus in 1080p at 60 frames per second? If so, the camera is pretty bad for video. I think that's just confirms what you said.
Well, it is pretty bad for video because of the lack of touchscreen and the lack of articulating screen, the lack of, you can't see the display in the viewfinder like you can on the GH4. It's just not that great. But it will autofocus at 60p, but it doesn't have the AI servo autofocusing. So there's a couple of different autofocus modes, and it will autofocus, but it looks more like the older cameras in that it's really jerky and erratic. It doesn't do that smooth focusing. It does that smooth focusing when you're shooting 1080p at 30 frames a second. It is worth noting that it shoots 60 frames a second at 1080p, which is something new for Canon. This is the first camera they've released. All the other cameras only did 30 frames a second. YouTube now supports 60 frames a second. If you watch 60 frames a second video, you notice the difference. It's smooth. It is really nice. A lot of people don't use it anyway. But again, I would point you towards the GH4 at the same price. If you care, it'll do 96 frames a second at 1080p or go all the way up to 4K. Just a better camera. Love also asks...
he said, cool. I have a 600D and I'm thinking about getting the 70D or the 7D Mark II. I do 50-50 video photo.
The 600D, for those of us in America, is the T5i. And 50-50 photo video, I don't know. It's hard to say because the 7D Mark II's image quality is so much better than the 70D, but the 70D is a better video camera. And then you have the GH4, whose image quality also doesn't match the 7D Mark II, but is just a way better video camera. So there's not a great answer right now.
So he's got to choose.
No, and you might even look at these Sony SLT cameras. Great video autofocusing. Again, there's no one answer here for somebody who wants to do both photos and video. There's just not a great answer.
Okay.
Wanted to go over some of the stuff that kind of disappointed us with this.
Disappointed. Where's that when you need it?
It costs more than a Nikon D610, which is Nikon's entry-level full-frame camera, which definitely has better image quality and has more shadows that can be recovered, but is not a great sports or action camera. So if you were doing landscapes or maybe portraits, I would probably push you to the D610 still. It has some great function buttons on it, but they're not that flexible. I wanted to assign the function buttons to stuff I use, like turning on bracketing or turning on HDR, and you can't. You can assign them to a bunch of things I don't use. I don't know. And that stupid depth of field preview thing, which I find completely useless on modern digital cameras, since you can just take a sample picture and see it much better.
That's a good point.
You can reassign it, but not to anything meaningful. So this is a minor software tweak. Canon just didn't think of the way that I use a camera, didn't provide enough options. The live view continuous AF user interface is just clumsy. It's just poorly done.
As you said, stupid. That's the word I'm reading.
It's stupid. There's no touchscreen, as I mentioned, which for a camera designed for video, or any camera, is terribly, terribly useful. Even when you're doing wildlife and you want to zoom in to see if your bird's eye is in focus. If you have the 70D, you go like zoop, like that, and you can see.
I usually kind of tease you about your touchscreen obsession, but every time I use a touchscreen, I'm like, yes, thank you for not making me press all of these buttons.
It just feels like, of course, because we already get to do our smartphones now and our tablets.
It just feels like, of course, guys. Come
on. And just like any other DSLR, it has a 30-minute recording limit. Again, I'm going to push you towards the Panasonic cameras. If you want to do longer recording, they don't have that limit. If you do YouTube videos or you just want to record your kid's play or soccer game, it's nice not to worry about it shutting off and missing the end of it.
Surprises.
Yeah, great build, right? It feels great in the hands. It feels more like the 5D Mark III.
That's true. It didn't, usually that kind of bothers me. Like I'll say if something feels chintzy, but it felt good.
Yeah, a lens rental company did a full teardown on it, and they say it's extremely well weatherproofed. Which has been an issue for us. We've soaked a couple of cameras lately. Yeah. But it feels great in the hand, and one of the things you hated about the 7D was the buttons are flimsy.
Yes,
in particular, the AF on button would just sometimes stick.
Yeah.
And you're trying to take a picture of the bird, and then the AF on button won't work.
I don't have time for that.
But the 7D Mark II seems to be much better built. It's extremely durable, quieter shutter, as we mentioned. It does have this little overview in the display which shows your electronic level. And I love to have that for wildlife because you can tell when a camera's off level, and as you're tracking a bird, it's really easy to get off level.
Yeah.
Helps me keep the camera level.
Get caught up in the moment.
Anyway, the electronic level in there just looks better than any other proper DSLR. It doesn't, so the display doesn't look nearly as good as a mirrorless camera, which has a full LCD in the viewfinder, but it's better than any other DSLR. So they made some minor tweaks there. Bulb mode. We don't need to carry around those stupid remote shutter releases, those timers that we have.
Yeah.
Because you can now have it take a 5-minute picture without an extra gadget, of course.
That just feels like of course to me.
Of course, it feels like of course.
That feels like of course.
But the menu is super stupid. You would think you could just switch to bulb mode and move the main dial until you got to 5 minutes. No, you switch to bulb mode. Sorry, go ahead.
You have to switch to bulb mode and then do something else?
Yeah, you hit the menu button, and then you scroll around and you find bulb mode, and then you can set it to 5 minutes.
Come on.
So, like for night photography.
Just put it in there. You know why?
Why?
That just feels like of course.
It feels like of course. For night photography, I bracket my shots often. So I'll take a shot at 1 minute, at 3 minutes, and at 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm always in there changing it, and to go into the menus, it's like, of course, Canon.
What is iFi instead of Wi-Fi?
iFi is this SD card that you can stick in the camera, and it will send your pictures as you take them to your computer or a phone or something like that over a Wi-Fi network.
Yeah.
So one of the disappointments was that it does not have Wi-Fi built in. The 70D does. But it does support the iFi with a second card, and we have that with the 5D Mark III, and it actually works pretty well for wireless tethering because you can shoot RAW and record it to your CF card, and then stick the smaller JPEG on the SD card and have it instantly transmit to your computer so you can load it in Lightroom and get a quick preview.
That's a surprise.
It's an okay solution. Yeah. I like that it has 2 card slots too, especially for wildlife. I like to put a fast CF card in there so it won't slow down the buffer. And then I'll put like a 128 gig SD card on there because some days you have a good day and you fill up your CF card, and it's better to have that extra card than to just run out. It's like, isn't it the worst when suddenly you fill up your card and you're trying to like go back and delete pictures?
Yeah, you're like, oh man, you have to go through and then you could miss your moment.
Yeah, so it's nice that they have that extra card in there, though. The SD card will definitely be slower. My menu has multiple tabs. My menu is the last menu in there where you just put the commonly accessed things, but now you can have multiple tabs. So before you were limited to like 5 menu items, and now you can have as many as you want. Yes,
Cool.
better organization.
Q&A.
Whew.
Cool.
We have a bunch of questions that people
Did
asked
we-
us.
I think we just answered everything.
We'll see. We have a bunch of questions that people asked on Facebook or on Twitter.
Yeah.
You want to read some of
They're
these?
here.
Yeah.
Vivek Khanna. Question for the show. Tony, if someone were buying a new 5D Mark III, would you recommend they buy 60 and plus a 72 instead for the same money? So would you buy those two cameras instead of the 5D Mark III?
What do you think?
I don't know. I would say why? I'd say, what are you taking pictures of? What are your needs?
Yeah, right? Nobody ever tells us what they actually use their cameras for when they ask these questions because there's no one answer.
If they're
Right. If you're shooting weddings, I'd probably still
and
steer you towards
wildlife,
the 5D Mark III
yeah,
because you need that faster focusing system. The 60 doesn't have a great focusing system in it. So I
Yeah.
guess it depends.
it depends.
If you're doing landscapes and wildlife, yes, because the 60 is fine for landscapes. It has the same image quality as the 5D Mark III. And then you could use the 70 for all your long
I really
stuff.
want to just like give an easy answer all the time and be like, yes, go for it. But then like I think about it too much. I'm like, no, why? Like if you're a professional bagel photographer, you don't need two cameras. Or if you're just doing wildlife, you don't need two. So it's like, I don't know. These
Right.
questions, they're too involved.
Yeah, if
Not
you do
enough information.
landscapes and wildlife, yes. If you do portraits or weddings, I'd probably still get a 5D Mark III.
Fredrik Martinsen. Besides the 70 MK,
I'm sure it means
As a
570 Mark II.
Mark II, as a sports and nature camera, and 60 is not. But can you please make some comparison in focus and image quality between them both? Because they're close in price.
So to compare the 60 and the 70 Mark II, they're different cameras. We now see that the 70 Mark II is going to have about the same image quality as the 60. The 60's image quality isn't there anymore, which makes me rethink whether I would actually recommend it for landscapes or just steer them towards the 70 Mark II.
Yeah.
I might actually send you to the 70 Mark II with an 18-35, a Sigma 18-35 f1.8 for landscapes now because the image quality is so good. If you want to be in the Canon world.
Okay.
The 70 Mark II's focusing is vastly superior to the 60, which does not have a very good focusing system. It's not good for action. It's fine for still life. Some action with the center focusing point can be fine. I hope that answers the question.
I hope so, Tony. I hope so. Cameraman. Hi, Tony. I've seen one video where a guy says there might be a problem with some of the AF points, and there might be a problem where the exposure meter isn't showing the viewfinder while in M mode. If you can you please have a look at this problem?
We'll look into this more
this?
for future reviews, but so far the focusing has been perfect. We haven't experienced any glitches whatsoever.
noticed anything.
And we ran it through a whole gamut of tests. So
We
if
did
there
quite a
is
bit.
some problem, it's not a serious problem. And stuff showing in manual mode. I don't know, I did a lot of manual shooting. I did all of the image quality tests in manual, and I never had a problem with it.
Aaron says, how's it travel during blimp rides? Because I put up something on Twitter and said it traveled well in the car.
Uh-huh.
So it did really well in the car. It was quiet, like it wasn't too chatty. Didn't have to go to the bathroom or anything like a small child. So I'd think that it would also travel well in a blimp.
Yeah, but we take these very seriously, and we've hired a Zeppelin. So we'll be up in there next week. Just stay tuned.
Yeah, we have to do that. Anthony James Coles, TNC. Do you think this is a good do-it-all camera if a 5D Mark III isn't in the budget? Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I think so, especially given that the image quality is no longer a problem now that it's past
Yeah.
Sony and Nikon. Yeah, it seems like a great
Yeah,
do-it-all camera.
to do it all. Tariq Brown. Oh my, can't wait. Think I might be getting one, but not 100% yet. Would love your thoughts on the cam outside of its obvious strengths. In my case, I would love to know how you rate it as a wedding cam.
I'm interested in your thoughts, but for me, I would probably still lean towards the 5D Mark III and pair it with that 70-200 f2.8 there because of the depth of field differences. You have
Yeah.
to remember to multiply
Depth of field
your
is important.
aperture by 1.6 if you're putting in one of the APS-C cameras, which means you're not getting 200 f2.8. You're more like, f4.5.
Yeah.
So you don't get the same background blur, but the image quality itself was pretty good, and it would certainly be a workable wedding camera.
Yeah.
So it could be good. It just wouldn't be the perfect choice.
I'm satisfied with that. Would really like to see a comparison of the 5D Mark II and 7D Mark II, since I believe a lot of the folks will be willing to trade in their 5D Mark IIs for one of these, me included, little smiley face.
Well, do you remember the 5D Mark II well enough? It's been a while.
It has been a while, but I feel like this is way better.
Yeah, the focusing system is so much better. The 5D Mark II, which has the same focusing system as the 6D, basically,
Yeah.
had a not good focusing system.
No.
And we did a lot of wildlife with it nonetheless, but it was kind of frustrating to use. This is a far better focusing system. And the image quality is going to be about the same comparing the 7D Mark II to the 5D Mark II, because we compared it to the 5D Mark III, and the 5D Mark III had about the same image quality as the 5D Mark II. They didn't make any improvements between those generations.
Vetsinger 10. Hey TNC, how is the battery life and the buffer rate? How fast and accurate is autofocus during live view? Improvements over the 70D? Will you personally get one for your wildlife photography? We do personally have one.
Yeah. It's not a loaner. We
have to buy everything. That's why we don't do expensive reviews. Nobody trusts us.
We can't speak to the battery life yet because it has not run out of batteries.
We've just had it for like 24 hours or something.
Yeah, I'm sure the battery life is going to be the same as the other DSLRs, which is to say it's much better than any mirrorless camera because it's not working as hard.
I actually did an autofocus during live view. Did you?
I did quite a bit, and
Wow,
it's exactly the same as the 70D as far as I can tell, which is to say it's way better than the 5D Mark III or other cameras. It's on par with mirrorless cameras.
And I want to keep this one.
Yeah, we're keeping that. Oh, yeah, the size. You know, I never really compared the size between the 7D Mark II and the 5D Mark III. What do you think? Those seem about the same, right?
Yeah. Let's take off the lenses and do a little...
Will do. People really freak out when you leave your camera exposed, but that's just the mirror there. I get some dust on the mirror and I brush it off. It's not even the sensor being exposed.
I just hose it off.
Yeah.
I just like put a little dish soap. They feel exactly the same.
Yeah, and
I don't really do that, just to be clear. Like, I don't want somebody to just be like, oh yeah, okay.
Chelsea says it's okay.
That'd be horrible.
So it actually seems a little bit bigger than the 7D, right? The original? Yeah, it seems a little bit bigger and heavier to me.
Yeah, okay.
So about the same.
That was really scientific.
Especially because I'm sure somebody has weighed them.
You can definitely
measure them.
I know, I have what it weighs
way
here, but you can just look it up. I mean, it's not, I guess it doesn't matter. You don't have to be that precise. Like, it's not going to weigh on your neck or something like that. Okay, Ollie, I bought a 70D, and then only a couple of months later, they released the 7D Mark II, which is typical. But seeing as I mainly do video, surely the 70D is better with its touch and flippy screen, right? Oh, you like the touch and flippy screen too.
Yeah, right? That's where it's at. Touch and flip. Yeah, the 70 Mark II is 60 frames a second. If you want to feel jealous, you should be looking at the GH4 stuff. That's a video camera. Same cost.
Oh boy, he just bought one.
So now we have some live questions that Siobhan has screened for us and sent over to us. These are questions that you guys have asked during the course of the video. That's why it's smart to tune in live.
Tune in live.
Let's see what people have to say. Okay, we answered that question already. I would like to see how fast autofocus in video mode, about the same as the 70D. You can check our 70D review. We probably won't go into it too much. Like I said, it's kind of hard to use the autofocus because you can't really control the autofocus point without shaking the camera around.
Brian.
Would be interested to hear your thoughts on using this with a 180 millimeter macro lens.
Macro.
So if you're at 180 millimeters with macro, I presume you're doing living subjects because you'd use a shorter macro lens if you're doing still life.
Yeah.
So it must be like insects, and the crop sensor here will get you some extra distance, and it will actually get you a little bit more depth of field. So I would think it'd be a pretty close to ideal system for macro. We don't have that particular lens. We have a 150 millimeter macro, but we can give it a shot.
Yeah.
Try it. With my 7D, the autofocus is very fast, even in low light. The frames per second is sufficient, and I like it very much generally, except for the image quality above ISO 400. Is the 7D Mark II any better? Yeah, it's way better.
Yeah.
way better.
Yeah.
You saw the samples at ISO 1600. You're going to see something similar throughout the whole range. It's better.
Darlene Watkins. We love Darlene.
Yeah, we know
Currently
Darlene.
have a T3i, wanting to upgrade to the 6D strictly for the capability of shooting in low light and low noise. How does this camera compare to the 6D regarding those factors?
About exactly the same.
About the same.
So if you don't mind the smaller sensor, if you don't need blurring the background with full frame lenses or some other aspect of full frame lenses, then I would push you towards the 7D Mark II instead. Though you might also look at full frame Nikon cameras, like the D610 is available for even less and has better image quality, as long as you can find the lenses that you need.
Yeah, if you're patient enough to trade systems.
Okay, I guess that's all the live questions that we had. I want to remind you of another review that we did of the 7D Mark II before it was released, covering all the stats, all the numbers, full comparisons to other cameras. You can see it at sdp.io/72 preview.
If you want to know more, we have a whole buying guide. We get so many questions. Which lens should I buy? Which this should I buy? Which that should I buy? We took all of your questions. We put them in a book. And we never have to answer one of your questions again.
Yeah, so check it out at the link there, sdp.io/usbg in the US. That'll take you to Amazon, or sdp.io/buybg. That takes you to our website where we ship books internationally. The paperback is less than $20. The ebook is like $9.99.
Yeah.
Great deal. It's over 350 pages
you know
with hundreds of illustrations. What else?
If you have all this gear and you're still like, I guess I don't really know how to take pictures, and I know you people are out there, we have a whole book about how to take pictures.
Well, I think you just need to buy the right camera. If you buy an expensive camera, you're going to make beautiful pictures.
False.
Ah.
This book just feels like of course to me, okay?
But I hate reading.
It has 9 hours of video.
What, I can just watch stuff too?
Yes.
What about this post-processing that I've been hearing about? Do you have to edit your pictures too?
We have a Lightroom book. We have it all.
Go to sdp.io/lr to check out our Lightroom book. You can look up SDP or look up Sunny Digital Photography on Amazon or at our website at sdpcommunity.com. If you have other questions for us, write a comment down below and we'll try to get back to you. Be sure to share this with your friends. Click like, please, and click subscribe to see more free videos that we make. That's it for us.
I'm so tired.
We're out. Thanks, guys.
Bye.